So I've got, so far, I got 3 people thinking about it. So if you come up with questions as you go, I mean, you can go ahead and pull it up on your phone, have it in like Safari or like Chrome or whatever browser you use. pollev.com/ChrisNichols585. And if you come up with a question you want to ask, you can ask it. Questions about the class, how it works, any question about assignment, something as we go. And I'll try to cover as much as I can, but I might not cover everything. And if you have a question as we go, then stop and ask it. I feel like that would be useful to some people. So I want to go over to a different window, leave that open in the background. Hopefully it stays working. I don't really know how that works. I'm assuming it will. Let me go up here, hit home. Go over here to Blackboard, shut that down, go back to my institution. Well, I mean, maybe I should give more detail on, I didn't use Blackboard very much in Gant's class, you said? You used it some? Not really very much? Okay. You know how to get there, though, and like log in and stuff? Okay, good. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, because you've been through a whole semester of other classes as well. Okay, so let's see. So basically, I can log in, and everybody kind of knows how to do that part. Student ID number, age, birth date. Wait an inordinate amount of time to have it log you in. Let's see, do I have a cord in the event that the Wi-Fi is being overused? There it goes. Action already submitted. You're a liar. Let's try this again. There we go. It had done it, it just hadn't done it. Let's see. Go to our class, 1302. And that's where we'll be. And I might as well come back over here to our lesson real quick, which is an intro to literature. But then go to the next slide, which says, don't forget, it says labor. Why does it keep saying that? Like I fixed that in the other class too. Not Labor Day, MLK Day. MLK Day. I think it's because in some semesters, literally the first day of the semester was the one that was MLK Day. This day is the second weekend. So this class, we have class on Tuesday of next week. That's not MLK Day. But your other classes, your Monday, Wednesday classes, you won't have a class that next Monday. I don't know why I said that next Monday. Next Monday. What day is that? The 20th? Yeah, the 20th, no class, school's closed, don't come, we're closed. I mean, you can come, but I don't want anybody here. And then, want to remind you about the things that are due over the weekend. So, I know this is really weird, but I'll be trying to do some grading on Monday on MLK Day. And so the stuff will still be due Sunday night. And I want you to get in the habit of it being due Sunday night, not Monday night. So it'll be due Sunday night even though we don't have class until Tuesday. Does that make sense? It's going to be weird. I'll get a lot of emails like, I thought we had till. And so we'll just weather that through the first week. But I'm going to show you real quick just a reminder of where that stuff is. I've got the syllabus quiz located here. Oh, and by the way, every single time if you submit a quiz, wait, I don't think you can submit quizzes late. No, you can't. Once the due date passes, they're done. There's the assignment, the info sheet, where you click the Google form, you fill it out, you attach it, and like I showed you the other day, you attach it just like you would on an email. And then after you're done, it should show you the image that you submitted. If you see nothing, I won't either. So if you see oh my gosh, it doesn't show my image, submit again. You can hit start new, go through that whole process again, and then attach, maybe try a different file format this time or a new screenshot, and it should let you submit. And then the discussion posts, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm not too worried about this introduce yourself. I mean, you still have to do it, but the requirements I'm a little more lax on. I still want you to try to do like 100 words and say like, hey, this is me, this is what I'm like. stuff that's important to me, stuff I care about. Because you've just done a whole info sheet, right? So you've got all like yourself fresh on the mind. You can encapsulate yourself down into like 100 words, I think, fairly easily. It'd be kind of funny if somebody was like, "This is me. This is my name. If I were to win the lottery, I would." Now it does ask another question that somebody said, "Hey, I forgot to answer that other question, like what my favorite book was." Which, if you forget to answer my favorite book question, I shouldn't even have mentioned that. That's supposed to be my litmus test for if people read. Damn it. I wish she hadn't told me that. Then So, because I'm always just curious, like, do people read on the very first post? Or they just kind of go with what they think. But, yeah, see it says, your favorite book, right there. So, that's the only one that has that weird set of instructions. The rest are just, what do you find interesting about the readings? In case I forget to mention this later, I don't think I will, but I want to be sure. A Rose Frimley and the Yellow Wallpaper and Barn Burning. Those are the stories you can write about for the first discussion post. Discussion post 1. That's what I mean by first. And you only have to write about one. So you could do your original post over barn burning, your 2 replies over other posts about barn burning. Or you could do an original post about barn burning, a reply about Rose Frimley, and a reply about Yellow Wallpaper, people who wrote about those. But you don't have to do that. You can just write over just completely one if that's how you choose to do it. These 2 are in the book, Rose Frimley and the Yellow Wallpaper. So you'd have a book in front of you, open papers. And the other one is just link only. So that can only be read here. There are other places you could probably find a copy of this story, or if you have a book at home that has, the collected works of Faulkner, because we all just have that lying around. You could read it out of that as well, and it should be basically the same. Although this is the one story that when somebody tried to find a different version of what I had, that was the one that if they missed the last 2 paragraphs, it changed the whole meaning of the story. So you don't have to write about all 3. You only have to write about one. You are supposed to read all 3 because the quiz will be about all 3 at the end of next week. But just so you're aware. Notice how neither of the other 2 readings, this is why the color-coded syllabus is very important, because the other 2 readings are not something that you're allowed to write about. The writing effective arguments, writing about literary genres, those can't be written about, only the stories themselves. So that's that. Have we gathered any questions along the way? Have I said confusing things? I've got another person thinking about it. By the way, I did say it's anonymous, right? It's not going to show who wrote what. Like it assigns you like an auto-generated ID, and I don't ever see what that ID is. So I think that's all the stuff I have to talk about in the class. The lesson videos are here. They'll start popping up, I think, on Sunday because I'm going to upload them Sunday. I have PowerPoints here. They're old. You don't have to use them because we don't really go over all of them. Although I do think this one's going to be there, the Intro to Lit. Although it's an old version, I should update it. But for now, we're going to continue this Intro to Lit. We're going to talk about snakes. Couple definitions of snake. Nobody has any questions before I continue, right? Well, I guess if you did, you would have put it on the thing. So we're going to look at Webster's 11th Collegiate Dictionary definition of snake. We're also going to look at an Emily Dickinson poem titled A Narrow Fellow in the Grass. It's actually not titled A Narrow Fellow in the Grass. She didn't title her poems. Other people did. And it's just usually her first line of the poem is the title. But it doesn't ever actually say the word snake in it, but it's about a snake, as you can tell when we read it. So first, we're going to look at the dictionary definition of snake. Any of numerous limbless scaled reptiles, suborder Serpentes synophidia, with a long tapering body and with salivary glands often modified to produce venom, which is injected through grooved or tubular fangs. Terrifying, right? No, it's very direct. I mean, it doesn't really give us I don't think the accurate sense of what it's like to be a human person meeting a snake. It tells us what is a snake scientifically. But then there's Emily Dickinson's A Narrow Fell in the Grass. I think also this doesn't quite capture what it's like for everybody to meet a snake, but it tries to capture as broadly as it can the experience of meeting a snake, I think, for most people, by doing so through a different speaker. Here it is. A narrow fellow in the grass occasionally rides. You may have met him, did you not? His notice sudden is, the grass divides as with a comb. A spotted shaft is seen, and then it closes at your feet and opens further on. He likes a boggy acre, a floor too cool for corn, yet when a boy and barefoot, I more than once at noon have passed, I thought, a whiplash unbraiding in the sun. And when stooping to secure it, it wrinkled and was gone. And several of nature's people I know, and they know me. I feel for them a transport of cordiality, but never met this fellow attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. So you can tell, like, first 4 stanzas actually seems like a little boy who's not particularly scared of snakes. He just is like, well, did the grass move? I think I just saw like a whiplash. No, it's gone. But he does acknowledge that most people, when they see a snake, have at least a tighter breathing, which I think we can all get, right? A tighter breathing is like somebody goes, I guess, like, like, then they can't breathe. But the little boy, he has no problem with that. And by the way, this is something confusing we'll get to when we get to poetry. I don't know what it is about poems, but we tend to naturally feel like poets write from their own perspective. Like when we listen to songs, they're poetry. So we tend to think that songs are written from the writer's perspective. But in this case, you can very clearly see, it says, yet when a boy and barefoot I more than once at noon. As far as I know, Emily Dickinson was a girl. So she's speaking from the perspective of a speaker, a young little boy, or somebody who used to be a boy. So poets can also set up characters through which they speak, which it can be confusing. Although it does happen in popular songs too, but not as much. Well, I say popular. You ever heard of Randy Newman? He wrote the music he writes the music for like Toy Story movies. You know, the guy, you got a friend. Like, he writes all of it. But he also is a Grammy Award-winning songwriter who's written other stuff as well. But he often will sing from the perspective of characters. And there's one song that he used to sing where it was like a song that was sort of exposing what racists are like. And so he wrote a song from the perspective of a racist. And he said, he like kind of yells out something in the song about those N-words. He says that in the song. And he used to perform it in concerts, and people would appreciate like the storytelling that he had in the songs. But he found that at a certain point when he would come to the South, it was like after the Civil Rights era, he would come to the South and he'd sing that song. People were requesting it, and they were singing along and quite loudly, especially in that part. And so he realized that they were thinking of it more of an anthem and less of a, oh my gosh, look how bad racists are song. He stopped singing it. He'd still sing at other places, but he stopped singing it in concert. So that people still, I think, to this day, still have problems with understanding when a poet will sing a song from the perspective of a character or write a poem from the perspective of a character, not necessarily that is themselves. It's very not something that we naturally consider to be the case. And the way that we do with stories, where when a story is told from a character's perspective, you know, we're told this. I am Katniss Everdeen. We're like, okay, got it. Boom, writer's Katniss Everdeen. We tend to be okay with that with stories, not so much with poems. We feel like, well, that must be the writer, not a character. But that's just something I thought I would mention about poems and stories, that they can both be written from the character's perspective. Now, that's 2 definitions of snake, dictionary, poem. I feel like we tend to think of things more like sometimes in pictures. I mean, if that weren't the case, then YouTube would not be so popular. People people would read books more than they watch YouTube, which I'm not so sure is true anymore. So there are these definitions as well. Some of us think of snakes, we think immediately of this. A terrifying, vicious, horrible monster bent on killing me. Well, actually, to be fair, if you just look at this snake, what's really happening?
He's stuck.
Yeah, he's stuck. I think what got him stuck was he went through an electric fence, and he got a little bit shocked. And he's like, "What the hell is that?" And he tried to attack it, and he just bit the fence. And now you can see like right where his mouth was like laying, it got burnt. It's blackened right there. I think you can see some blackening right up here. So yeah, the electricity kind of killed him. And really, he's not as big as he looks. Because was that rebar? Rebar is like what, that thick? So his head's like that wide. He's not that big. When I look at this, I think the snake looks like he's like that big around. There's just no way. But yeah, some people see snakes and they think terrifying. Other people think that's a future tattoo right there. Gorgeous snakes are. They hang from trees and they're pretty. And that's one way of seeing a snake. You see like them for the gorgeous qualities they have, not necessarily the terrifying qualities. Other people see them more like local, the snakes you actually have to deal with. I'm not good with snakes. I think I'm fairly certain now that's not a water moccasin because people told me that that's. Wait, yeah, people told me those are black, right? Yeah. I still can't. 100 times I've heard students tell me what this is. I think it's a copperhead. It is a copperhead. I had one class to do with a cowboy hat and a big beard, very confidently said copperhead, and I'm going to go with that. I feel like he's the authority because he had a cowboy hat on when he answered the question. And then he talked about how, well, it's not going to kill your cows off, but, it'll probably kill like a chicken or a dog or something because of the amount of venom that they, and I was like, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Apparently it's not a cottonmouth. That's what I was saying. I don't know. But you're thinking more like local, practical. This is the snakes that I have to deal with on a regular basis. Copperhead? I still feel like I'm not. Yeah, y'all said copperhead. Y'all nodded when I said copperhead, right? So that's what it is. Okay. I don't know why. It's like I always feel like I second guess myself. And this one, of course, this snake is pure evil incarnate. Satan himself. Everything that's bad that exists in the entire world wrapped into this small cartoon, I believe, coloring page snake. If you've got crayons at a church, you could color in Satan. During Bible school. And then we have Adam and Eve, who are always conveniently located behind bushes, because there's no nudity in Christ. I think literally until I got married, no, that's absurd. I did not that long, but you think as like a kid, you're like you never even ask how like babies get, like parents do. Where are babies in as soon as you start to ask your parents, like, you shut up. Or the Lord values a quiet child, or some crap like that. So pure evil right there. Cute little tongue. Pure evil is probably adorable, if you think about it. Because that's the most enticing thing. Pure evil is a cute puppy. It's one of the reasons I chose this image, because I was like, if it's got horns, it's a little. I wanted to go for like the most docile looking snake I could find. And some of you don't think of snakes at all. You hear snake, you think video games, you think Solid Snake, you think Metal Gear Solid. Or if you're an old dude like me, you don't think of that at all. You think of the character that snake was based on, Snake Plissken from Escape from New York, Escape from L.A. Very plausible movies about the future where all of Manhattan has been turned into one single prison. And if they don't get this dude out in time because they think he's dangerous, I think they blow up all of Manhattan with a nuclear bomb. If I'm not mistaken. The plot, I might have the plot details wrong. But with a plot like that, does it really matter?
The other one deals with like the president's poison and they need to get the antidote from L.A. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's always like something they have to get out. If we don't get it out fast enough, we're going to blow it up. It's the weirdest thing. So he's got to get out. Kurt Russell. What was he in recently that was really good? What was it?
Christmas Chronicles.
Christmas Chronicles? Oh, that was horrible.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. That was pretty good. No, he was a narrator in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's what he was in recently. One of the narrators, or maybe the only one. I don't know. Some people see snakes like this, harmless. You might see an adult snake and think this. This is like that kid in high school, like, would in ag class, he'd go out and grab a snake from the field. And then like the next period came and he'd go to biology class and bring it and be like, everybody, look, I brought a snake. Is this okay, teacher? And the teacher's like, I don't care. This is high school. And so the kid would like walk around with a snake and be like, oh, look at a snake. For that brief period, he had like power over everybody, right? Because he's not scared of snakes and you are, and he knows it. And he's just like, what? It's just a snake. But he knows you're scared of the snake. But he's still... funny thing, that kid in my high school, one time the scientists with science, the biologist, somebody from A&M Commerce brought over like an anaconda. And like somehow we ended up having like an anaconda or some long type snake there. And this one kid just loved to come play with it all the time. And then it wrapped around her arm and wouldn't let go. And they had to have like the people come over from the college and they were like, what do we do? And like I don't remember if they like tranquilized it so it knocked it out, so it fell asleep, and so they and I was like, that's what you get. Terrorizing us. You've been terrorized. And then I think after that she still played with the damn snake. And then this is probably closest to what's actually in the poem, probably closest to reality. This is what the little boy saw. He's like, what was that, a snake? I think so. Looks like a little just whip going through the grass. Not like a whip that I think they say these days, like a ride, like a car, like a physical, like Indiana Jones type whip. Did I have that? Was that correct definition?
Yes.
Actually, why is that? Because it whips you around? Is that like a car like takes you places? Is that what it is? Let's work backward from this. So yeah, little garden snake or something. Is that a garden snake? Grass snake? Just basic garden variety snake. Just going through the grass, and little boy sees it and he's like, "What is that?" You can see like the grass is a little like, what do you call it? More humid than say corn floors, which corn floors is pretty hot, like in a cornfield, right? Like the ground is pretty dry. Is that right? I don't know anything about plants or farming, but just whatever the truth is, that. So also there's this one, which I just want to do. This is kind of funny. Not all of them are dangerous.
You lift him up.
This is a hognose snake.
He does more. Most of them,
Hognose
the ones I've
snakes
seen in the
play dead.
past, just kind of hang there like dish rag limp.
So if we go through, I like this part
Well,
where they start flipping him over, and he won't let them flip him over.
you won't let me flip him back over.
That's how they normally
He's like,
do.
no, I'm dead. Dude, I'm dead.
Hey, dummy, dead snakes don't roll.
I'm dead. So yeah, some snakes apparently they do that instead of attack you and bite you. Whereas I think of like that little, I don't know if you've ever seen this picture. I saw this picture recently, but it was like a picture of a family getting their pictures taken in like a ditch with like the grass up and like the nice barbed wire fencing in the background. They were getting like their photo taken. But you can see like in the exact frame of the shot, there was a snake coming up like this, biting a child's elbow, like gonna be biting an elbow, and like a fraction of a second later, and they caught it like on camera, which is nuts. I actually don't know if the kid actually got bit. I just have only ever seen the photo. I don't know the story behind it, but yeah, so they can be dangerous, not dangerous. In fact, that video, when I saw it, I went, "Oh, snakes, they're not so bad." I don't know if this is true, but there was a student in another class who told me, "Oh yeah, the hognose snake, what it does is they mostly try to eat eggs, but if they have to like kill something, they beat it with their heads." I mean, you have to look at that to verify that. If that's the truth, you just imagine it sit there smacking its head on something to kill it. It's hilarious. But otherwise, when something bigger comes, they just pretend like they're dead. So all kinds of snakes, we see them, in new ways with new information, or we see them emotionally, realistically, as it was in the grass, associatively, metaphorically, because of like the association with like Satan or with these characters that we know. There's really no one way to see the snake, and that's kind of the point. And I think that that's what's great about literature, is that there's somebody with a real talent for writing things in unusual, vivid, or interesting ways, and they're showing us as exactly as possible how they see the world. And sometimes I think that the best writers aren't necessarily we often, I think, put a lot of pressure on writers and artists, I think, to be better people. Sometimes, or like, what is it like? We have this weird habit in our country of, I don't know if you know this, but like almost all the presidents that we vote for fit most of these categories. They're like 6 foot tall, white, have a family, have a pet, have 1 or 2 kids, are married straight to a wife, are Christian. If you look at almost every single president we've had, they meet most of those categories. You know, of course, they're outliers, like Barack Obama, first black president. But there's always some category like they don't fit all of, but for the most part, they fit most of those categories, as we tend to associate people with those sorts of conditions. And we also will tend to think, like, if we don't have a family, well, how could they be a good president? Like, we want a family man because we're like, oh, he's got something to live for. He's like got a good head on his shoulders or something like that. Or he cares about people. But what if somebody like ends up getting divorced because they're so dedicated to their work? You know, they're like, I got to do better for the country. I don't have time to worry about a marriage. You know, I need to make my country better. We would go like, we don't like that. You know, they should be marriage first, take care of the country second. But that's just half the time they have to work on the country. That means now, like he has a fight at home with his family. I mean, that might affect the country decisions. Like, we're going to damn war. We're going to war. And I'm like, what? What happened? Oh, we got in a fight last night with his wife? Damn it. We got to be ready for that. But like we associate these sorts of things weirdly with and I think we do the same thing with artists, is we feel like if they're going to be giving us art that tells us, you know, how people are or how they should live, then we have to hold them to a higher standard. And I think that sometimes that's a little bit unfair. You know, when Dickinson becomes a recluse and she lives all of her life in this one house, we go, oh, well, what does she know about the world if she only ever spent all of her time in this one house? I think it's a little bit, it's really what their talent is they just have this talent for being able to see the world from a unique perspective and relay that perspective to others. That's what they're really good at. They might have crap going on in their lives it's difficult to deal with, just like anybody else, but they're able to communicate that well and show the way that people think, the way that we see things, the way that we express, the way that we experience the world. And as a result of that, as a result of seeing the world in these unique ways and showing us how they see it, they're able to make these unique perspectives and like a poem about a boy and a snake be just as valid a way to define snakes as the definition in a dictionary. And what I think makes literature so great is it opens a world to us and a perspective that we otherwise wouldn't get. Even things like, you know, television shows like Netflix, streaming movies and TV shows that we watch, they help us get to that in some ways. And the most interesting phrase I found in the poem from before, the snake poem, is the zero at the bone. I feel like we understand tighter breathing. I also feel like maybe inherently, even without much explanation, you can understand zero at the bone. You meet a snake, there's a tighter breathing, but there's something else, isn't there? If you see something that terrifies you, there's that tighter breathing, but also a zero at the bone. And I feel like most people can kind of understand what that is without having it fully explained. Nonetheless, I'm going to try. So I go back to this image to try to get closer to the idea of zero at the bone, because it's really only scary snake I think I saw, you know, besides Satan, is this one right here, because it's like right there at the beginning. Oh my gosh, it's trying to get me. But I thought snakes don't always do it for some people. Some people, there's other images that do it. Oh, I feel it. Did you feel it? Feel it? You feel it somewhere in your body?
Yes. Spiders should not be that big.
That's a zero at the bone right there. You're feeling it. Or this, sometimes you're fine with all that stuff, but broken fingers bothers you. And I really wish, I need to change the title of this video. It gives it away. There's no surprise here. So, like, what is it about spiders? Is it too many legs? Like, what is it about them? So you can see there's already spiders there on the toilet. And he lifts it up. Ah! You feel it? You feel the feeling? Like something drops out of your body? Okay, that's enough happy place. Did you know I Googled Texas landscape? I don't even know if that's really Texas, but that's what popped up.
It looks Texas.
I was like, hey, it looks like Texas to me. I feel like I've seen this. I feel like this field is out back of my parents' house. So that I also feel like another thing that could get us closer is a scene I really wanted to show, but there's certain things you feel like you can get away with as a teacher, and certain things you're not really sure about. So there's a thriller that came out right around the time of The Sixth Sense. So it sort of got, the I See Dead People movie. Spoilers. Terrible. The movie called Stir of Echoes that has Kevin Bacon in it. But it's a thriller, and it's kind of got some supernatural elements. But at some point in the movie, you see that there's a sexual assault that had happened to somebody. They kind of do like a flashback. But in that sexual assault scene, they're not graphic, but they do show a little bit of the violence of what would happen before a sexual assault. And the girl's trying to get away, and she's trying to claw herself away on the ground, and the floor is wood, and she pushes too hard on the wood, and her fingernail shoots off, and blood spurts. I wanted to show that, because that's really, I think, what makes the feeling drop out of your body, is seeing people fingernail stuff. Or like watching a needle go into an eyeball slowly.
I think describing it, you can kind of get it. Just by describing it.
Yeah, even describing it is enough. But those little, like, one of those hopefully gave you the feeling like in the center of your arm or your neck or like your legs where something just feels like it gets cold or like tingly. There's a void, something. And I think that's her way. She says zero at the bone. Takes two normal words that we use every day, zero, bone. Puts them together to give like a weird sort of symbolic image metaphor thing, a kind of a compendium of all this together that perfectly describes that feeling we get when we see these kind of terrifying images, things that scare us. And they're just two simple words. And I think that's what's brilliant about great writers is they can convey complex ideas and emotions to us through a couple of normal words just reconfigured in ways that we're not used to seeing. Genius. So in some ways, the most realistic of definitions for us as people is the least appropriate in terms of like its accuracy of wording. If you can't put zero at the bone in the dictionary and have that stand for anything, what do you call it? Zero at the bone, huh? It's quite perfect though. And I'm also going to read a story called. I want to talk about how we will come to any reading with our own interpretation. One key. How do I say this? There are some works of literature we'll read this semester where the facts aren't available to us. Like, you ever seen the movie Inception? There are certain movies like this sometimes that pop up where, like, at the end of Inception, there's a top that's spinning, and it wobbles, but it doesn't fall over. And depending on what you think it ends up happening, whether the top falls, whether it doesn't, dictates how you interpret the ending of the movie to be, like what literally happens. So he leaves facts out so that you're left to interpret what actually ends up happening on your own based on how you saw the themes play out during the story. So sometimes there are people who create literature like that, where they want the actual facts to be up to question. A lot of writing, though, gives us all the facts, and what we're meant to do is interpret it, express our own feelings on it in our own way. I don't think those feelings are ever invalid. But, for example, I've had some people tell me, no, the top must fall because it wobbles. Now, you can think that it falls, but you still have to acknowledge that literally it doesn't. You don't see it ever fall, so it's meant to both go one way and another way at the same time and leave it to interpretation of people. I happen to think it stays going. I never felt like it fell. But now I'm thinking about Inception. I apologize. It's a good movie. So it's going to be important, as you see in this little short, very, very short story. It's like a page long that I'm about to read. That it's important to interpret it based on the facts we're given, not read anything that's not there or try to interpret by ignoring certain facts. Because I think there's definitely one specific reality she wants us to see, but with that reality, we can make our own emotional interpretations of how we feel about the character. So I'm going to read that now. It's Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin, written in 1894, a long time ago. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story, as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden wild abandonment in her sister's arms. And when the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her house the tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled, one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself asleep continues to sob in its dreams. She was young, with a fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name. But she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under her breath. Free. 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 The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and gray and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her, absolutely. And she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of elimination. And yet she had loved him. Sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of this possession of self-assertion which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free. Body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? Have to open the door. Go away. I'm not making myself ill. No, she was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot along all those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident, did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. And when the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that kills. And now I think there are some things we have to acknowledge about the way that she's written this story. So I think that maybe one problem I did have with people and teachers in high school is that they always said that in every single case there was one interpretation to a story. I think that's not true. I think that the author gives us a situation and invites us to feel how we want to feel about her, but she's very clear about the facts related to her. Sometimes there are poems like Robert Frost's A Road Not Taken where the actual facts of the case are left to us to determine, where we can interpret it one way or another way, and both are valid. In this case, she's giving us a lot of information that I think it's important not to ignore. Some students will tell me, oh, well, yeah, the doctors were right. The joy killed her. She was so happy when she saw her husband that it killed her. But why do we know that's not the case?
Because she was literally just jumping, basically excited about the fact that she may have been free.
Yeah, I mean, she was just moments ago excited about the fact that she's free. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to spend paragraphs and paragraphs establishing how grateful she is for her freedom to then all of a sudden see her husband go through the door and be like, oh, those emotions are gone. Happy. It doesn't make any sense. So the doctors were interpreting from their perspective what they see, because they can't imagine a scenario in which somebody would see their husband walk through the door and go, oh, damn it, and die. But nonetheless, that's kind of what happened. Additionally, we see all the positive imagery that pops up, don't we? We see the pretty blue skies and the birds are singing and somebody's singing out of a window far away. Some dude's saying, get your flowers here, and the pistachios. I'm thinking of Aladdin. But somebody's just down there, like, very happily, like, selling things. And she's spending all this time thinking about, and I'll have other students who want to add information to the story. They say, okay, so she's disappointed when she dies, but she's disappointed that she can't have all that freedom now, and that's what kills her. But they don't want to think of her because, like, it says here, like, where is it? Come on, monstrous joy. There it is, monstrous joy. The stuff I'm really interested in hearing from you is not like telling me what you factually think happened. Like, oh, this must be what happened. I'm more interested in what you thought about. Once you've acknowledged what you think happens, I want to know mostly just how do you feel about what you've read? Like, what interests you? What intrigues you? What stuck out to you? What are your feelings on it? That's the stuff I want to know, because I don't want to see plot summaries in your discussion posts. I've read this dozens of times. I don't need to be told what it's about. What I don't know are your feelings on it. How did this make you respond? And now you can still interpret incorrectly, because you have to interpret based on the facts. So I'll have some students tell me, well, I mean, it's obvious that if she felt this way and she felt free, he must have been like domestically abusing her in some way, or been like, verbally abusing her in some way. But I think that requires you to disregard stuff that she specifically says, the writer says, about this relationship. She says she knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. I mean, if somebody had beaten you, you wouldn't say he had kind, tender hands. You might say, well, I don't know, some people, they get really snowed. But the author's very careful because she's writing about her. It's not a first-person perspective. It's third person. And the omniscient narrator is saying, the face that had never looked save with love upon her. So he'd only ever looked at her in a loving way. He'd not ever looked at her in a vicious way. I mean, I think that's the implication here. Never looked at her in a vicious way or a mean way or a hatred way, always with love. So he was a good husband. But she feels freed by him being gone. And I think that the author is trying to tell us that what does she feel free from? If not him, what does she really feel free from? It wouldn't have to be him. It could be any husband.
Just marriage in general.
Just marriage in general. This institution that in 1894 you were just sort of expected to enter into. I mean, I don't know when she was married, but I mean, I know at some points during existence, there'd be families who were like, you're 13, 14. What's taking you so long? We can't get. What was it? I believe the whole plot of Little Women is about trying to get these girls married off, isn't it? My gosh, what's taking so long? We have to get them married off so they can, live. And so there wouldn't be a whole lot of choice in her matter here. She just, okay, the expectation is you get married, and she gets married, and she's nonetheless not very happy with the experience. She's like, and somebody will say, well, then you shouldn't have gotten married. Well, I mean, how are you supposed to know what marriage is like until you're in it? You get there, and you, I mean, I've been divorced. You go there, you think, oh, it's going to be like what my mom and dad went through. And it turns out you can't just pick somebody. There has to be some sort of compatibility. And it takes time to learn whether you're compatible. You can't just know, like, oh, it's been a few weeks, or in my case, 7 months. Let's get married. Don't do that. Give it time. You might find out after 3 or 4 years that this wasn't long enough. I should have known him longer. But she finds when she's in the institution of marriage that the institution of marriage itself is what she finds oppressive. She's like, man, I don't want to live for somebody. I mean, nonetheless, in any marriage, whether or not you like this or not, there's a give and take. They do something, you do something, and it's kind of that thing. And granted, I think there was a lot more give on the woman's side here in this old 1894 marriage. But luckily, I think my wife is sort of lucky in this regard that I'm not the kind of guy who wants to go drinking out with his buddies till 4 a.m. every night, doing God knows what. I kind of just want to sit at home, although that becomes the thing that she's upset about because I literally just, let's go out this weekend. Or we worked all week, we could just sit. And I'm like, there are movies, there are books, we could read those. And she's like, no. Then we could go take photos somewhere, post those to Facebook, have a record of our lives. I'm like, while that sounds nice, we could also sit. I could play video games while you go do things. Then we're not together. I also don't like that. You could watch me play video games. No, I don't want to. She doesn't want to do that either. So it's like there's a little bit of give and take there. You do some things, they do some things. It's sort of living with each other and doing what the other one wants to do and giving a little bit. She realizes she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to be a part of that give and take. She just wants to do what she wants to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Personally, I don't. But that's kind of what I'm interested from you guys. Once you've acknowledged the facts of the story, this is what's going on. She's oppressed by marriage. It's not necessarily him. He's not beating her. Not only that, it's not like we get to the end of the story and she murders the guy when he comes back. She's like, damn it, stab. She just her heart can't take the disappointment. So we're not even given somebody who is literally a monster who stabs. She just has this thought of, man, I had been so much happier when I thought you were dead. And I think that that's where the interesting part comes in, is that they've given us a view of the world. Now we can interpret. We can say, like, this is how I feel. I mean, does anybody feel like she is a monster for this? Or are you more, like, sympathetic? feelings.
It's one of those halfway points.
Kind of halfway between.
Yeah.
I mean, nonetheless, to feel free, she has to be happy about her husband's death. Kind of. And I can see that there's that interpretation there. There's that feeling. Other people feel like just totally on her side. It's going to be a long semester, guys. Let's have opinions, guys. Let's be people. I don't like being people. And I'd point at somebody and say, "You, give an opinion." Oh, not you too. Crushing disappointment. So that's really what the thing that is I'm interested in. So let's go over here to the syllabus, and I'll show you like the sample discussion post, which I think I kind of mentioned the other day, talked about a little bit, but now we have some context, especially we've read that story. So like I said, this is a clickable syllabus. You see sample discussion posts, click right to it. Excuse me. So the original post that you do has to be 100 words. The replies have to be 50. And what I want you to do is you read a story, or later it's going to be a play, later it's going to be poetry. Point out what was intriguing, interesting to you, really caught your attention, infuriated you, delighted you, that kind of stuff about the story. So in this case, Magnus Baraka says, and he's talking about a story of an hour. It's one that you can't write about because it's just, we only read it right here in the classroom, but he writes about it. He says, I thought this story was pretty good. Mostly because it was short, haha, just kidding, kind of. Now, if you do that kind of thing the whole time, I'll be like, you're not really saying anything. But he finally does say something. He says, but seriously, I liked how we could see her true feelings through her physiological reaction. You don't have to use words that big if you don't want to. I mean, I probably would have been pissed at her if she just didn't like her husband and was whining that he was back. But the heart attack lets me know that she truly feels oppressed by him, truly. And there wasn't really anything she could do about those feelings. I can't think of anyone that I know would choose to just straight up die despite their husband. Like, oh, you're back. Ugh. Like, nobody you can't just on command die. So it must have been something she truly felt. So he's sympathetic to that idea. And now the next man is Baraka says, and I would prefer that you approach it this way if you have disagreements. He says, well, I don't mean to be a jerk or anything, but I couldn't disagree more. And why would you ever want your husband to stay dead if you were a good person? There's just something inherently evil about that, I would think, whether or not the heart attack was under control. I mean, she's a monster. To be just happy that somebody's dead, I mean, it doesn't matter who's dead. To him, that life is sacred, and to think somebody being dead is a good thing, yeah, it's great for your freedom, but to want them dead, you're a monster. And the next person says, I don't really think she's saying she was a good person necessarily. Just that he can sort of see where she's coming from. If she had chosen to murder her husband when he walked through the door, I mean, I think we can all agree that's absolutely nuts. Am I right? And I can usually tell, by the way, I'm assuming they were at 49 words, and they were like, crap, am I right? 51, and that's what happened. I know because I wrote it. So notice the replies don't have to be as robust. They don't have to have as much information about feelings and stuff. They just sort of a reply to somebody else's feelings. The same here with this other guy. He counters, but you don't always have to counter. You can say, I totally agree, and then give some clarification. But you try to give a detailed account of your feelings about that story, at least the part that you felt was interesting or intriguing. And if I have a problem with the way that you do it, I'll give notes like, too much plot summary, or I need more detail here. I don't really understand what you're trying to say. I mean, I'll say something like that. But usually these are mostly just completion grades. Once you do them, and I feel like that's good enough, it's like you get a 10 for each one. And you have to always do the original and 2 replies. If you just do the original, you're like, I don't have time for the replies. Well, I'll never see them. It only tells me you're finished when you've done all 3. Then it releases them to be graded, which is really weird because sometimes it'll show a list of who's done the discussion post, and it goes by the date that you did your first post. So somebody will do a post on Friday but not finish until Sunday at 11:58. But then when they get done with their post, it'll bump them to the very top of the list for being graded because they did their first post earlier. I don't know why it does it that way. It doesn't go by the last post, which is how I wish it would do it. But it only releases it to you when you've done all three. So that's the discussion. But any questions about the discussion posts, like what I'm looking for there? If you do have a question about the discussion post I'm looking for, you can add them here where I still have no questions because everybody understands everything perfectly. The next thing I'm going to do is I could go back to the PowerPoint, and I will, but all it does is, wait, how am I back here? Oh, I'm still in the middle of it. Haha. So we read the story, discussion post, yeah, essays. I like to think of these essays as like an expanded version of this discussion post idea. They're located here under assignments, same place where the info sheet is. You'll submit the first essay here, but the assignment sheet for all three, same evaluation census 1, 2, and 3 will be here. Make it bigger so we can see. By the way, on any web page, I'm hitting Control plus, it makes it bigger. Control minus makes it smaller. There are 3 of these. I only assign it once because they're all the same essay. But you can choose green readings from the course calendar only, not the blue ones, so none of the ones that are like a chapter about writing about arguments or stuff like that. The first essay is over the short stories. The second essay is, I should just write Antigone because it is over drama, but there's only one drama we're reading, and that's Antigone. And then the last one is over poetry. So you have to write about one of the poems. This is one of the short stories, Antigone, or one of the poems. And if you want to know what you can write about for this essay, you can use the calendar here and use Antigone as the dividing point. So anything before Antigone, which is the drama, is a short story. So that's any one of these 12 short stories that come before. 4 that are available at links, 8 that are in the book. Anything after Antigone is poetry. So anything from week 6 onwards is poetry. And so once you've picked a reading, and I will tell you right now, the only time you're ever able to repeat a reading that you've written about is on the research paper. That's why I have this weird Venn diagram behind me. Evaluation Synthesis Essay 1 must be about a different reading than Critical Analysis is, which must be about a different reading than your Antigone paper, which must be about a different reading than your poetry paper. But your research paper can be written about anything you've already written about. So you can repeat something. And I will tell you right now that if you read Rose for Emily and you're like, man, I really like that story, I think I might save it for the critical analysis paper because I understand it so much better. I wouldn't do that. The critical analysis paper, I think, is the only essay you can't write about a story that we have in this semester because the critical analysis is written over Rose for Emily. So if you get the inkling that, I want to write about it for essay 1, just go ahead and do it because you won't be allowed to write about it for the critical analysis. But you can write about it for the research paper because the sample research paper is over a story we also didn't read in this class. So once you've picked one of those 12 stories, and you can read ahead if you feel like there's nothing really that you gelled with that well so far, you can read ahead to the other weeks. Most people end up writing it over the 6 stories in the first 2 weeks because that's what you've read by the point in which we had the first essay due. But you pick one. After you've done that, here's what you do. You write a reader response to that particular literary reading. That's basically what your discussion posts are. Basically, identify your opinions on the reading and how you responded to it. Then, evaluate those opinions and responses, discovering why you think what you think about the story by synthesizing those opinions and responses with the knowledge and experiences of your own life, discovering how your opinions on the work of literature have been shaped by your life experiences. It's a complicated way of explaining something I'm about to explain a little easier, but think of these questions. So, first of all, what did the literary reading mean to you? How did it make you feel? Then, how did your experiences shape the way you read the story? Basically, you need to write what from the story you most responded to, and then what in your life made you respond in that way. And try to provide compelling thoughts about the themes and subject matter as well that show true insight. I don't know why I repeated that same sentence twice, but it's also right after that. I go in and delete that maybe. So it's like a heavily expanded discussion post where you don't just give your opinion, but you try to explain why you have that opinion using your personal experiences. So I might have the opinion where I read the story of an hour, and I'm more sympathetic toward the main character because while she is sort of unhappy that he's dead, or unhappy that he's actually alive, she felt that strength of freedom from marriage so strongly that it killed her. So that's a true feeling that she has. And I'm more sympathetic to that feeling of the oppression of marriage, and I totally understand where she's coming from. And that's maybe my opinion on it. But why do I have that opinion? So I need to look into my own life, my own experiences, and see why I might have that opinion. I am married. I have a wife. I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. I have one who's a teenager, so I've seen her growing up and going through things. I have a toddler who's, brand new and learning the world. So I'm surrounded by 3 girls all the time. I want those girls to be happy in life. I want them to. My wife that I have is, I don't know why I said it that way. Wife that I have is super independent. She's self-driven, always has been. She was, I think she was like kind of like a student worker, basically. She was one of the people who was helped with orientation at A&M Commerce. Then she went and got her master's degree right after that. She had her master's degree, I think, at 22, 23. She had her master's degree. As she was getting her master's degree, became an academic advisor. So usually everybody has a master's. She didn't. She had just a bachelor's degree with almost master's, and became an academic advisor. She became the senior academic advisor, then she became the head of academic advising in her college, and then, meaning her department. Now she's the director over all the advisors. So all the advisors at A&M Commerce, she's the director over them. And I've watched her, knocked on every one of those barriers, and every single time I'm super proud of her, and she's amazing. And I always knew she's amazing. It's just seeing that validation of how amazing I knew she was and how strong I knew she was. So me being surrounded by both independent women who are self-driven and women I want to become independent, self-driven women because of how amazed I am by my wife, those have helped shape why I feel very supportive of the character in the story, who nonetheless dies, but who I support her feelings in understanding that she wants to not be oppressed by marriage, but be in an environment where she feels like she can grow. So it's me not just having the opinion, but linking it to something in my life that has caused me to develop that opinion. And I forgot to mention this in the other 2 classes, and I feel kind of bad about it now, but for example, if you read Story of an Hour and you say she wants her husband dead essentially, and the reason you feel that way is because of your strong Christian background where there's the sanctity of life and not wanting to wish. It's almost like murder in a sense where you might feel like death if somebody wishes that on somebody else, and that's a very strong thing to wish on somebody. That's bad. And you might say, well, I was raised Christian, and so wanting murder is really, really bad. Wanting somebody dead is really bad. And so you might link it back to your Christian upbringing. And you might wonder, well, Nichols, I thought you said in English 1301 not to, use Christianity as an argument. But that's not what I'm saying here. You're saying, here's why I think what I think. If your Christian background's why you think what you think, that's absolutely true to you. So it's fine to talk about, your Christian background here in a way that it wasn't to say people should do this. People should not believe in gay marriage because of, what God says, which is difficult to say to everybody. But in saying I don't believe in gay marriage because of my Christian background, I can't really argue with that. That's true. So it's fine to talk about your personal experiences in this story. In fact, I require it as to why you think what you think about the stories that you read. So again, that why is very important to me. It's a 600-word essay, by the way. I know that's what you were waiting for. Where's the length? Right here. Now don't stop listening because you heard the length. So important things to me, don't spend time summarizing the plot. Most important thing, be sure to include your personal opinion about the meaning of the work, and be sure to relate those opinions and meanings to specific events and details of your own life. So in addition to what I just told you I did on the sample paper, this student really at this point in the paper is where, okay, I should mention real quick this. It's about a story called The Birthmark, where a woman she was a gorgeous woman with a birthmark on her face right here, it looked like a little hand. She gets married to this scientist, and he's like, "You're super gorgeous," and she's like, "Thank you." And he's like, "You know what? I bet you're perfect, except that one little birthmark. I bet as a scientist, I could figure out how to get rid of that birthmark." She's like, "Well, I mean, I think it's part of my identity." And he's like, "Yeah, but I mean, like, you'd be perfect if not for that one little blemish." And she's like, "Really? I mean, I always kind of liked it." And he's like, "Yeah, perfect though." So he starts trying to use his science to figure out how to get rid of that birthmark, tries to find like different methods. Over the course of, he sort of starts to take it. It's like that's his enemy. And as he kind of vilifies it more and more, the birthmark that he can't get rid of, she starts to feel less and less of a human. She starts to feel worse about herself. But to the point that where in the story, she says toward the end of the story, Georgiana states that life is but a sad possession to those who have attained precisely the degree of moral advancement at which I stand. Being what I find myself, methinks I am of all mortals the most fit to die. She says she's fit to die. She goes from, "Oh, I'm super cute," to, "I'm fit to die," by the end of the story because of the way he's treating her. And he says, the writer of this essay, "It's ridiculous that she's willing to die over somebody else's perception of her birthmark. In the beginning of the story, she found it to be so essential to her character, but at the insistence of someone who finds fault in it, she is suddenly willing to risk death to remove it. There's no way that something so minor should bring such distress. Life is way too short to stress over something as small as I'm well aware." So he expresses his opinion on it. But you got to go that one step further. And I'm like, okay, so what caused you to develop that opinion? And he says, in high school, I worried about what people thought about my body type or whether I was overweight. In the end, nobody really cared. But it brought me a ton of undue stress. So he's giving his personal experience that explains why he felt that way about that character's problems with herself. I've also had students before say, like, well, I had like a pretty mean boyfriend who made me feel bad about myself, and so that's why I sympathize with this character as well. So that kind of thing. Like, it doesn't have to be something like super, super personal like that, but I want you trying to relate your personal experiences to what's happening in the story. Not like, oh, the character's got a birthmark, so do I. Like, that's a surface level observation, but like things worked out for the character in the same way things worked out for me, or I felt this way because of the way things have worked out for me. So that's the essay. The discussion post, notice it's kind of like a simplified version of that. You don't have to do the personal experience on the discussion post, just on the essay. Let's see, do I have any questions pop up? Absolutely none. Y'all got it. Y'all are perfect. Remember, don't come to your other classes on Monday. I will see you next Tuesday. This essay is not due until the Tuesday after next. Discussion posts, however, are due this Sunday, as well as a syllabus quiz. Don't forget to read. Y'all have a great weekend.